So hello everyone, I'm delighted you're able to join us today, and I'm really pleased to welcome you to another How to Do Research and Get Published webinar. And today's very important topic is how to do publicly impactful research. So I'd like to introduce you to our team. First of all, I'm Zoe, Head of Strategic Partnerships in the UK and part of the Sage Books team. I also represent Sage on the SDG Publishers Compact Fellows Programme. So it gives me enormous pleasure to introduce our first panellist, the chair of the SDG Publishers Compact Fellow, Dr. Deborah Rowe. Deborah Rowe is the president of the US Partnership for Education for Sustainable Development, where she convenes and catalyses leaders over 100 countries in business, education, publishing, communities, and other sectors to create integrated SDG and climate solutions. She heads two action groups for the Higher Education Sustainability Initiative, known as HESI, the Education for Green Jobs, and the previously mentioned SDG Publishers Compact Fellows Programme. Dr. Rowe teaches renewable energies, sustainable development, and related topics, and has received numerous awards, including an Energy Education Award at MIT from CEM. Our next panelist is Dr. Eric R. Bandala, who holds a PhD degree in environmental engineering, an MSc degree in organic chemistry, and a BEng degree in chemical engineering. His research interests in environmental engineering include A, water security, B, the water-food nexus, C, engineering, characterization and application of carbon-based materials for environmental restoration, D, international water, sanitation and hygiene, known as IWASH, and E, development of climate change adaptation technologies for water security. Dr. Bandala is an editor-in-chief of Air, Soil and Water Research. Moving on to our third panelist, Dr. Minna Halma, who is Professor of Sustainability Management at Aalto University School of Business and the co-editor-in-chief of Organization and Environment. She leads sustainability and business research at her organization and is co-founder of the cross-disciplinary Creative Sustainability Masters Programme. And her research focuses on co-creation of sustainability innovations, circular economy, system-level sustainability impacts of business, and contextualized innovating for poverty alleviation in the global south. So I've got here a brief showcase of our panelists' work. Deborah has highlighted her role as chair of the SDG Publishers Compact Fellows alongside the resources produced by the Compact, which include the range of top tips you'll see listed here, which Deborah will reference some of during her presentation. And we'll make sure we circulate these slides with links in our follow-up. On the right, you'll see the Sage journals our other two panelists represent. And if you think these journals might be a good fit for your research, we'd encourage you to look at the journal manuscript submission guidelines. And if you think you'd be a good reviewer, we encourage you to register. But before we get started, I'd like to make a quick mention of a free policy tool called Sage Policy Profiles, which some of you may have already come across. This helps researchers track their policy impact and discover opportunities to engage with policymakers. It's powered by Overton, which is the world's largest searchable index of policy documents. And I thought, given our audience today, it would be a useful application to flag. There's two tools I'd like to draw your attention to. Firstly, the policy tracker, and this is something that helps researchers understand how their work is influencing policy with tools to communicate that impact. And it also shows researchers where their work is cited in policy documents, and they're able to visualize this data and share it with the network. And the second free tool, which is new this year, called Policy Matcher. This is a really exciting feature that connects researchers to policy opportunities tailored to their research, making it faster and easier for you to share your expertise with relevant policymakers. It matches researchers to policy engagement opportunities based on your biography and country of interest. And it provides up to 3 personalized matches per month. We'll make sure we share these links with you too. So throughout the call today, please feel free to send in your questions to our panelists using the Q&A function you'll see at the bottom of your screens. We'll try and get through as many of those questions today as we possibly can live, but we'll make sure we share a blog post where we'll get through the remaining questions. If you spot a question you're interested in that's already been submitted, please feel free to upvote that question and we'll try and prioritise those questions. So I'm going to pass over to Dr. Deborah Rowe to begin the presentations.
Thank you so much. It is a pleasure to be here today and to work with you, all the good work that's going on at SAGE, and to see all of the introductions in the chat. We are quite a family, an informal family, of researchers and change makers from around the world. So I'm going to give you some top action tips. They'll be helpful for you in your career. They'll be helpful for you to make a difference in the world. And let's go to the next slide. So the HESI SDG Publishers Compact Fellows, where did they come from? Well, first, HESI stands for the Higher Education Sustainability Initiative. We're about 15 years old, and we are 10 United Nations agencies that came together to collaborate so that we could better solve the problems that are reflected in the Sustainable Development Goals. And we also work with higher ed networks for sustainability and individual higher ed institutions and individuals. The International Publishers Association and the Publications Office of the United Nations came together to work on the SDG, Sustainable Development Goals, of course, Publishers Compact. And over a couple of hundred publishers have signed on to that. And it's 10 points of what you can do to integrate sustainability into your businesses, the publishing ecosystem, and also into the operations, of what goes on and into the partnerships. But we found that people needed more guidance than that. And so the International Publishers Association president and the head of the UN Publications Office running this asked us at HESI to put together an action group. We actually operate as a think tank and an action group, and every Tuesday we meet. We have multiple publishers, like dozens of publishers who come, and they have fellows who, on a pro bono basis, and we're very grateful to them, are helping to shift what's going on in the world of research and publishing so we can be better at solving our shared societal problems. The SDG Compact Fellows have all sorts of organizations that we collaborate with, associations of journal editors, associations of practitioners and policymakers, and many others. So we're here to help you do your research, both with integrity and with societal impacts that are positive and also positive for your career pathway. Next slide. So we've made it easy for you. We've got top tips on exactly this topic of how do you create impactful research? How do you align the research? If you haven't looked at those Sustainable Development Goals yet, just put it in. It'll pop up from multiple UN sites. And these are the opportunities as well as the challenges we face as a species on this planet, where we can reach our better selves. We can reduce unnecessary human suffering that is because of thoughtless practices or because of dynamics that are going on around the world. And researchers have a very unique and important role to play. And so we focus on those who could benefit. Well, who benefits from solving societal problems? All of us. Specifically for researchers, we've created an SDG rubric. These are all live links. You will have access to this afterwards with a set of resources. The rubric allows you to look at what you're doing currently and what you're thinking about working on next, and to see how they align with the SDG targets and indicators. And maybe it gets you to say, what I'm doing isn't really what I want to be doing. Look at these other Sustainable Development Goals, or look at how they're intertwined, or look at the different metrics, the targets, the indicators. I hadn't thought about those. And then therefore redesign the research that you're doing. For you as researchers, we also have top tips on how to collaborate. And what we found is there's a big gap between what researchers put out and what practitioners, people who are working on the solutions on everyday real world problem solving, what they need, and also what policymakers need. So even if you put out useful information, that doesn't mean it gets in the hands of those who could use it. And also sometimes we make up our research questions based on the last academic conferences that we went to and the journal articles that we read, but we're not listening to those who are going to use our research outcomes. So co-creating research with practitioners can be incredibly powerful, useful, and there's nothing like, because I know I've had it my whole life in my career, there's nothing like waking up in the morning and going, I am so excited to go do my work. So there's your top action tips, co-creating research with practitioners. We have other ones on policymakers, on journalists, you'll see in a minute. And then third, support equity, right? There's a lot of dynamics going on out there that are preventing equity in our world, and also a lot of opportunities to improve equity. So we put together top action tips for you, not only in the creation of your research, but also in its publication and in its dissemination. You can support equity. Next slide. So for academic researchers and authors, here's the focus of the top action tips for you. Next. Ask yourself, who is the research for? Beyond having to check off that you've got your publications, who's the research actually for? And then reach out to them and co-create the research question with those groups, with that intended audience. Your research will be much better because of it. Next. Include in your implications section of your article, and also, very importantly, in your abstract, the research outcomes that are relevant to practitioners, to policymakers, to professionals. Next. You know, practitioners and policymakers, they don't have access, and professionals often too, they don't have access to the journals. They aren't affiliated with the university, and their local libraries may not have it, or it's laborious to get it. And so for them to spend $50 or 35 or whatever, your 60 to buy an article when the abstract doesn't tell them whether it's going to be relevant to their work, they just won't do it. And so your research outcomes that could be used in the world get lost. And that's why it's so important to put them into the abstract. In addition to putting those research outcomes that are useful to the world into the abstract, create a separate summary. This is number 3 now. Create a separate summary of your research with the relevant outcomes and share it with practitioners. They need plain language. And we have tips on how to make a plain language summary, how to use infographics, and go find the publications they read so that it will get to them. Get your work out there. Number 4, next. So we also have open access author guides that will give you more details about, so that you can think about this as you're moving along in your research. One is called Communicating to Professionals and Practitioners, and the other one's called Communicating to Policymakers, Journalists, and the Public. And we all know that the public's understanding of the importance and validity of science is not doing well, and that we're getting attacked by the public for saying, you know, that science isn't good work, and there's all sorts of inaccurate information that's going on out there that's attacking scientists. So it's really important that we not only communicate to the professionals and practitioners and policymakers, but also to the journalists and the public. And I know this is often uncomfortable for researchers. You know that all positive change is uncomfortable, according to Professor Zients from the University of Michigan. So get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Let me say that again. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable so you can make positive change. And one of those is to be willing to and able to communicate to the public and to journalists. And we have help for you there. Okay, and those are open access, so any publishing company can also adapt that to their own author guides. but any researcher can use it. Next. Also collaborate with your publishers and editors, influence them. I was at a sustainable development conference and there was a panel of journal editors, and I said, how do you interact with policy and practitioners to find out what they need so that you can then put your themes together for what your journals are going to be about? And they all looked at each other and said, we don't do that. We should. And it was so shocking to me. Such a sign of how siloed academic research can be. So influence what research is being done and who could benefit. Talk to your publishers, talk to your editors. Ask them to actively commission and publish SDG relevant work, and to build and promote the series or collections or specialist issues. All of these will boost impact. We have top tips. You can share it with them for academic publishers and also for journal editors. I think you'll find it useful for you as a researcher too if you read those. And encourage other authors to address research questions where answers are needed. So take a look at that, connecting researchers and practitioners top tips. Next. So to drive impact. I've already talked about how you need to communicate the research findings widely. Don't just put it in a journal because you want something you can be proud of. This is your legacy, not just your career pathway. And so for authors, editors, and publishers, you see these items on the left. I've already mentioned them. And I want to remind you for authors to support equity in how you do your research. And here's a new one I haven't mentioned before. Find ways to make your work openly accessible to everyone. And so we have a top action tips for that too. This collection of top action tips doesn't take long to read, but it'll have long-standing positive impacts for you and your career and for the world. So this one is on top tips to get waivers and discounts so that we can increase equity and access. Okay, next slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. We'll pass over to Dr. Vandala now.
Thank you, Zoe. And thank you, Deborah. I think that you made things very easy for me because I was planning to talk about most of the things that, or the items that you just mentioned. So this is the perspective from Air, Soil, and Water Research, which is the journal which I'm editor-in-chief. So I would like to get the next slide, please. Just like Deborah was saying on her presentation, we need to consider how all the SDGs are interconnected, and it is essential for sustainable development that we understand this interconnectivity and consider that we're not talking about silos. We're talking about a lot of interaction between them. And of course, because I am the water section editor-in-chief, I will focus these mainly on SDG 6, which is related to clean water and sanitation. But you can do the same for practically all of it. And you can have a lot of findings and interactions and interrelations between them. The next slide, please. So the way that we can create some SDG-related research with a high impact is just by considering just what Deborah mentioned a moment ago. So we need to target real-world problems. Let's start with real-world problems and not just literature gaps, so we can have a real impact on the information and the decision making that we have. Of course, co-creation is very important, as you was saying by Deborah. So we need to work with policymakers, NGOs, community members, and industry partners. Very important. And of course, Another very important issue here is to choose the impactful methods that we want to use for that. So we want to go for something that is actionable, timely, and can be understood beyond academia. I believe that this is probably one of the most important things that we can um, select among the impactful methods, because we want to create these to be really understood and useful for communities facing all the impacts from the different stressors that we have. Now, we need to design this impact, not just by any chances to achieve. And in order to do that, we need to consider always that all this information that we are creating need to inform policy and also improve practicity or practice. It will empower communities and innovate industry. If we can achieve any or more than one of these, then I can assure you your paper will be highly impactful and it will be very easy to publish. The next slide, please. Now, thinking on, for example, our journal, Air, Soil, and Water Research, how can we help on that? Well, we are working on creating this space for research that may have to do with any of these three topics, but also the interactions between them. And of course, how to increase impact pathways for outdoors. So talking about the SDG 6, for example, and the transboundary water challenges, we need to know, and you know that already, that those are inherently policy relevant, cross-scale, and usually a problem with underserved by silhouette journals. So we want to create this uh, interaction between the different topics that we were looking after. And it is important because our journal is capable to reach the right audiences faster, like, for example, all those with policy relevance that draws policy makers and practitioners, but also sit alongside complementary studies with, for example, special collections that bring cohesion to the fragmented research. So in the case of our journal ASW, publishing in our journal creates an impact in pathways for SDG relevant research by elevating visibility, enable collaboration, and catalyze SDG impact. The next slide, please. Finally, why should we submit research that can impact SDGs? Well, there are several signals of opportunity. First is interdisciplinary and applied work is welcome always to the journal. Policy relevant framing value is not penalized. Global South and regional case studies are always encouraged. And we are always open to pre-submission inquiries. And I will say that this is the most important. Just as I mentioned before, you can reach always any of our editors in the journal and we can have chat, so we can try to help you to focus your manuscript in a way that it will be more impactful. So we are always thinking about that, how to lower barriers and increase the submissions by achieving these goals. I think that this is my last one, so I'm gonna let Mina to continue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Deborah. Nice to meet you all in the webinar. I'm Minna Halme, Professor of Sustainability Management at Aalto University School of Business in Finland and co-editor-in-chief of a journal called Organization and Environment. And today I will be talking with you about two main issues. The first one is what our journal is doing for publishing societally impactful research. And secondly, I want to give some tips for early career researchers that want to make societal impact with their research. Next slide, please. We are two co-editors-in-chief, Stefan Schaltecker from Germany in addition to myself, and both of us have long experience from cultivating societal impact from the research that we do. Next, please. So organization and environment of its domain publishes research that is pertinent to the SDGs. So we publish articles that focus on organizing and management for environmental sustainability, as well as those that address the combination of environmental, social, and economic sustainability in the context of business and organizing. And if you are interested in the ranking of the journal, we rank among the 10% best in two fields, management as well as environmental studies. Next, please. To put our ambition of what type of articles we want to publish a bit differently, we especially want to address topics which are on how to organize within planetary boundaries and how to organize socially sustainably within planetary boundaries. Next, please. When Stefan and I came into office a year ago, we set certain new editorial goals to have more impact from what our journal publishes, and I now selectively address a few of these. One of them is strengthening our relevance for practice, and that means that we want to publish more articles that are interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary on their basis, so meaning research that combines multiple fields of the research, multiple disciplines to advance knowledge and to advance solutions to bigger problems than those that you can address with single discipline studies only. And we also want to see more research that includes practitioners, the non-scientific stakeholders in the knowledge creation to broaden the understanding of how we understand sustainability solutions and problems. Then, as regards the point here on the slide, creating wider impact in the academic world and beyond, I will speak about those three issues in a few minutes with separate slides. And especially now seeing that many of you come from the Global South countries, one of our missions is actually to broaden the voice of the journal to better include the Global South contexts. But here I want to stress that we want to see context-sensitive research from the Global South settings. So not just any studies from India, any studies from Africa, any studies from Latin America, where you could just change the name of the country to France or to US, and it would look the same. But we really would appreciate research that understands what context sensitivity means. So I recommend that you take a little look on that concept when you are designing your articles, if you find our journal of interest. And let's go forward to the next slide, please. So as I said, we made certain new advances, and one of them is including planetary boundary implications aside of managerial implications as guidelines for our authors. So in the end of the articles where you normally have the recommendations, implications, we also want to see a planetary boundary section whenever that makes sense. Next one, please. And we are also having a number of special issues in development. One of them is on biodiversity as a new research frontier for business scholarship. Another one is organizing within planetary boundaries. A further one is focused on the global south, themed as organizing sustainably with nature in the global south. And finally, the newest upcoming one, of which the call is not yet even out, is rethinking sustainability for a disrupted world. So you can see here that in many ways we are trying to push the boundaries of the topics that the journal publishes. Next one, please. Then about the new article formats that we have launched. You've now heard from the previous speakers, and you probably know it yourselves as well, that traditional theoretical empirical research articles seldom get perused by practitioners. So here we offer a viewpoints article format, which are shorter articles with more provocative, argumentatively supported ideas that open up new paths, and also that offer new significant insights for research and for practice, and which may also include an explicit call for action. Next one, please. And we are about to start a debate article format, where the idea is to offer debate type articles for two divergent perspectives from separate author themes on a very timely contested topic in the field of sustainability and organization research. And we can move forward. So that was a very quick glimpse to what we are doing in the journal side to advance societally impactful research. And I want to close up with some tips for making impact from your research, especially for early career researchers. And just to be, academic and precise, what is impact? When I'm talking about it, it is when our research changes how organizations and decision makers think and act, and when we use our roles as academics to foster positive change beyond our immediate research findings. So my tip number one is that start now. You don't have to wait until after tenure to focus on impact. Building the skills and the mindset for impact can start now. It's actually really important that it starts when you are young, because that is when you learn so much, or when you are early in your career. Secondly, impact is more than dissemination of results. You've heard it from the previous authors as well, but I stress it here that very often it's about engaging with practitioners during the research process. Business people, public sector people, NGOs, and so on. Next one, please. Some further tips. I think that it's really important to give back to those who you study. It's easier if you are doing qualitative research. It takes a little bit more creativity when it's quantitative research, where you are not so close to the people you or organizations that you study, but it's possible. Then when you are writing a journal article, think carefully about the managerial and practical implications of your paper, because it makes if you have good implications for practice, it makes your manuscript better, but it's also an opportunity to develop thoughts that you can share in other channels beyond the journal, like LinkedIn, blog posts, theconversation.com, op-eds, many other avenues depending on your country. And in O&E, we've explicitly said that we appreciate good, proper managerial implications for our journal, they are not secondary. And then I recommend that when you write, speak about the real issues, the real environmental questions, the real societal challenges. Speak to the head and heart to make the readers care. Because I guess you all know there are so many dry academic articles, and it would be really nice if they would be academic but not dry. So one of the ways of killing your articles in terms of speaking to head and heart is to use acronyms and just work with those. As an editor, I've read so many ESG articles that totally lose the environment. And recently I had this one manuscript that was all the time speaking about SDG 13.3. Not really, even almost once really showing that they know what they are writing about under SDG 13.3. And finally, for those of you who are in the field of organization and management studies, I recommend that you take a look at the Impact Scholar community and its mentorship program under the Academy of Management Division, Organizations and the Natural Environment. The link is here. It's a very interesting program and has had good results. And I think that the next slide is my final one, so let's go into that one. So please follow our journal if it's something that is sufficiently in your field. Here is the QR to LinkedIn, and there you can learn about the calls for papers for special issues, new articles, and about many other potentially useful things. So thanks for your time, and looking forward to the questions.
Thank you very much. Actually, before we move into the questions, I've got a few Menti questions to ask all of you. So it's just pulling up right now. If anyone who has a phone available wants to get it out, so you can work on these questions. Let's see. All right, sorry. Having a bit of a technical glitch here. So while I'm working this out, if everyone wants to continue to send your questions via the Q&A, we will get to as many as we can at the end of the call today. All right, I'm going to stop sharing. Hopefully we'll get this up in a minute. So continue to send us our Q&A, the questions that you're most interested in addressing to the team. I think, let's see, sorry about this.
I'm appreciating all the comments and the questions coming in. Someone asked about the sharing of slides through the email. There will be a sharing of the recording, and there will be a sharing of resources.
We're almost there. Sorry about that. All right, I think
Sean brings up the poll. We are also reviewing your questions, and we'll be answering them shortly.
I think so the polls aren't working correctly, so let's use the chat for now. I think the first question is, does your current research explicitly address UN Sustainable Development Goals? If you can write in the chat to say yes or no, and if so, if you know the number of the goal that you're working at, please feel free to pop it in the chat as well.
I'm typing in the question. Does your current research, you say the question again?
Does your current research explicitly address the UN Sustainable Development Goals?
And if yes, then which goal?
Okay, we're seeing some good engagement here. People are working on it across the board, though. All of them, 5 and 10, 17, 9, 13, good. So we're seeing good engagement across all of them. A handful of people are saying 9, 3, not yet. Okay. Another question on this. As still type out your answers to this one, feel free. The next question is, have you considered how non-academic audiences, like policymakers, folks in NGOs, or maybe in industry workers, can use your research findings? So feel free for that one to say yes or no. Look, all the time, that's great. Not yet. No, because of a paywall. Primarily policymakers. It's great. Yes, but you don't know how. Hopefully today's conversation can help you with that. Not yet. All right. And then I've got another question for you. Um, Answers are looking great, and I'm putting this directly in the chat too for you. What stakeholders outside of universities have you collaborated with? So I've seen a couple of these policymakers, and is there anything else you want to add here? You know, community members, maybe is it someone in your government? Is it a business? I see practitioners in higher ed. Seeing a lot of people talking about practitioners. Industry. Oh, nice. Multinational conglomerates. The Ministry of Health and Healthcare Workers. That's very important. Community members. Nice. Artists. Very cool. Healthcare members, NGOs, political parties. I see a handful of people saying no, and that makes sense. We're getting started. We're learning this. Perfect. And again, remember to send your questions through the Q&A because we're going to get started in that right after this last question. And the question here is, how confident do you feel that your research could influence policy or practice within the next 5 years? Do you have hope that, you know, your research may be able to have wider reach? So feel free if you want to write 1 through 5. Super confident, perfect. Hopefully, yeah, when people are in the middle, absolutely confident, very confident. Okay, we're seeing a lot of confidence here, which is fantastic to see. Um, it seems like nobody is on the opposite end saying that they are not confident, which is very, very positive. Highly confident, 100%. All right, this is great to see. All right, I think we're ready to move into the Q&A, Zoe, if I could pass it over to you. And everybody on the call, feel free to continue sending in your questions and we'll address as many live as we can.
I would be very interested to hear in the chat how people have been reaching out to policymakers and practitioners. So if you've got strategies that you've used, because we have all these confident people, please do put those in the chat.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Deborah. I just wanted to check in quickly that we're working from the open questions in the Q&A section at the moment. Great.
Yes.
Thank you very much. So I am going to start with one that has been upvoted. A question from Maggie, who's a PhD graduate from the University College London, who asks, I intend to write a monograph based on my PhD thesis. Could you provide me helpful info regarding this work? For instance, which office department shall I contact, consult with? Thanks. And I'm going to open that up to all three panelists. Anyone ready to share any insight there?
I would like to hear what was her field.
I cannot see, I don't know whether, Maggie, you can share that information, PhD graduate from University College London.
It depends on her field, like how to proceed. In general, I would say that if you have a monograph, then it would make a lot of sense to start writing a shorter article or two, papers from it, and also from the impact perspective, thinking of which channels are such and which audiences, which stakeholders are such that would benefit from what Maggie is finding in her research. So kind of, two avenues, research papers, but then also aside of that, something that reaches out relevant practitioner audiences.
Maggie's field is urban studies, by the way.
Okay, so that's actually very I wouldn't say very easy field, but easy field in the sense that you would have quite a lot of stakeholder groups that you could address. It could be selected public sector organizations and individuals. It also touches upon, say, citizen organizations. So please try to think of who are the most relevant for the message, for the findings that you are having.
And then call them up and see if you can do a front page article. We did that once, right? So we had information about career pathways for a green and sustainable future. So what's the professional association for career advisors? And we contacted them. We said, we've got information for you. We can either write an article or give us a reporter who will write it for us. And they said, how would you like the front page? And it has followed me for decades. So do not hesitate to reach out. Ask for the top of the organization. If they won't take the call, then ask them who you should be talking to about this. There is no hierarchy, we make it up as human beings. And when you bust through the hierarchy to talk to people higher up in organizations, lots of times you get more done.
Thank you, Deborah. I think that's a wonderful way to pass us over to a question that I've noticed in the chat, which was a question directed to Dr. Halmer about head and heart. I'm really interested to hear more about this. As someone who addressed this in her dissertation a few years ago, I'm intrigued to hear from Dr. Halmer about how we do this effectively.
Thanks. I love that question as well, because I realized that always when an article is written in such a way that it not only has the facts and the theory as theory, I tend to learn more from the article. It sticks with me. It has an impact on me. And I know that this happens to many people. And the kind of articles where the author is also trying to show why the research is so important, and not only saying this is so important because, but writing it in such a way that there is a hook for the message. That's really that can really make it or break it, and it's a little bit about a sort of a learning issue. Some of us as authors find it more easy to write factual things in a way that also move the hearts, sort of, have an emotional influence on people. But I suggest that it's definitely worth doing, and you might, discuss about this with friends or colleagues or people from other fields, like asking how you would write this, or you might want to read some magazines. I don't mean any magazines, but let's say Newsweek, Time, The Economist, even, to see like how to get a little bit toward that style. That it is not just sort of a boring paper or digital sounding text, but something that grabs you. I would actually recommend here, and I write it in the chat as well, a very interesting article of Professor Gail Whiteman, which is called Management Research That Breaks Your Hearts. And it's about a story of a topic and how she was able to write about it in such a way that it actually brought the heart in, but still in a scientific way. So read good articles which also move your hearts, and try to find your own style in doing that.
Thank you. That's a fantastic answer to a really open and wide-ranging question. I appreciate you taking the time. I've got a question here. One of the slides mentioned to select an SDG with a broader global interest to focus on in our research. My question is, are SDGs bound to focus on local problems, communities and societies? So how do you address this suggestion? Could you comment on this? And I'm going to open that up to all three panelists again.
I have a leftover from the last question, which is really you can use artificial intelligence to help you take the implications from your research and just ask it to put into a engaging version that could be used for a practitioner journal, and then take it and edit it from there. But it helps you to get out of the academic writing and into the writing that's going to appeal to whatever audience you're talking about. I agree with the idea about stories as well. And then this one, you said it's about local solutions focus, and how do you do the global or the national?
Well, funnily enough, I've had this question both ways, Deborah. So I'm interested to know, because SDGs have a global ramifications and local impact. We've had a question about research focusing heavily on local problems. Can you share thoughts on how SDGs can impact local communities too? So perhaps we could take it from that angle first, and then perhaps consider the other side.
Well, let me just share a story. So maybe 20 years ago, I looked at the gaps in between academics and policymakers and practitioners, the rest of the world. And I said, we got to do something about this. So we were talking about it with somebody from an academic society, and we said, well, one of the problems is the academic societies aren't talking about this enough. So I think I was 20 something. I set up a meeting in Washington, D.C. I invited all of the academic societies. At the time I did just the US, and now we do it more internationally. And I said, come and tell us about what you are doing in your academic societies to help your researchers and your educators address local to global societal issues. And I found a bank that gave me a free room, and I found somebody who would spring for lunch, and we ended up with 45 academic societies in the room. I literally was a community college teacher who just grew up in a family where we're used to looking at where are the gaps in society, and when you see a problem that isn't being fixed, you go out and do it. So we had an amazing meeting, and it kicked off what's now an association of 45 academic societies who come together to look at how to integrate sustainability into education and into research. You could start a network like that, right? And then you get people talking to each other, and then you have ongoing communications. I'm also going to put into the chat, there's a set of listservs that come out of the International Institute for Sustainable Development, and you've got something. We put announcements out about this webinar on those listservs. You can put your queries out of you want to connect with so-and-so. Just think about who you want to work with, and then reach out to them. And if you reach out to an organization and you don't know who to talk to, ask the person who picks up the phone or the info at who's the person who cares the most about a sustainable future for human beings in your organization. Can you please connect me to them? And oftentimes, once you're connected to them, they will then tell you about the dynamics going on in the organization. So I would say if you're working locally, think about how you share your successful precedents or useful information to take solutions to scale. If you're working nationally or globally, think about how you get that into the hands of the practitioners at the global to local levels.
Thank you, Deborah. And I was hoping, Sean, I could squeeze in one more question before we wrap up. And I think this is a really important one. It's what's this? Oh, and I've just lost it because it keeps jumping. Sorry. What systematic approaches or ethical considerations should researchers adopt when engaging with non-academic stakeholders, such as policymakers, industry leaders, or community organisations, to ensure that publicly impactful research remains methodologically rigorous and avoids oversimplification or misinterpretation of findings? So how do we do it to non-academic stakeholders in a way that doesn't lose its academic rigour? I think this is a really important question. Who would like to take that one?
Oh, again, so important question, which would warrant a lecture or a mini course as an answer. But I'd say that staying true to what your findings are, even though having to simplify them in a way and having to change the language into more colloquial language is something that is really, really crucial. So not picking and choosing and not becoming a politician or a lobbyist yourself, but really watching that you keep your academic identity, but that you communicate as a human being to the practitioners. And this is also something that depends a bit on your field and might require that you also rehearse and test with practitioners first, with some ones that you know or that are kind of safe, and ask from your colleagues, your senior colleagues, or those colleagues who are more experienced in doing societally impactful work, so as to sort of learn
Thank you.
Ethical, correct practices.
Thank you, Minna. I'm really sorry, we're so close to time, and I've promised Sean a minute and a half at the end. So I'm going to quickly pass over to Sean and take the opportunity to thank everybody for joining us today. And we hope you can engage with the material that we share. But I'll pass over to Sean now.
Thank you, and no worries. Just quickly to wrap it up today, I want to, well, of course, thank you everyone for attending, but want to highlight some upcoming webinars we've got. So a few weeks, we've got a webinar about work-life balance and mental health in academia. In early June on the 3rd, we have a webinar for Pride Month on research that impacts the queer community. So this will be for folks who are doing research that does touch on the queer community and impacts them, as well as folks who do identify as being part of that community. So feel free to join in and learn from our expert panel there. In July 1st, we're running a webinar on how to conduct independent research. So anybody here on the call today who maybe doesn't have an institutional affiliation, or maybe doesn't have good training or training available at their place of work, feel free to register for that one. We'd love to have you. Noting as well that we have an information for authors hub on the SAGE website. So this will have any and all information you need about submitting a manuscript for publication, from the very early stages to the of trying to find a journal, learning how to write a good manuscript, all the way to the very end of how to promote your research after it is published. I will send this over to you as well. We have an author newsletter, which includes information about top free academic resources, and also a list of our upcoming webinars. So no need to do this right now. We'll follow up after the call. Noting to everybody who is joining us live, you will receive a certificate of attendance shortly after this call today. And within the next week or so, we will send an email with follow-up referencing everything we discussed today, slides, a recording, and relevant links. I want to thank everybody for attending live today, for being part of today's conversation, for all of your very, very useful and insightful comments and questions. And a huge thank you to our panel. We really appreciate everybody's time today and hope to see you in a future webinar. Thank you and take care.